Morning. Um, Thanks for the opportunity to share some information about the recently completed active transportation plan. I'll just take a quick step back a couple years. Back around 2020, the NJTPA developed a active transportation background paper to help inform the long-range plan that we were developing. And especially around that time, we were seeing some major shifts in people taking on a new fondness for walking and biking and kind of looking for ways to be active outdoors during that lockdown phase. So this plan built off some of that momentum, and I think that it takes a step further to reinforce active transportation as a viable form of transportation for utility trips as well as recreation. So, as I said, we recently completed the active transportation plan. It was a consultant-supported effort, and overall purpose was directly to address a region-wide vision for connecting people and places through active transportation. And it also adds to a wide and growing range of NJTPA programming around complete streets and bicycle and pedestrian planning, multimodal safety, and so forth. So I don't have too much time to get into detail about any of these programs on the list, but I wanted to point out that they do provide a variety of support options for partner agencies to enhance active transportation planning, whether it's kind of short-term temporary projects or conducting planning studies or implementing more long-term investments. One of the major priorities was building consensus and a common vision for a regional active transportation planning framework. So the longer term goal is to establish a safe and functional regional network of active transportation facilities. And the plan also carried out a short-term goal of sort of developing and communicating some more objective information about active transportation and supporting that goal. So the plan came together under a few core principles. Safety, first of all. We know that 3% of crashes on our roads are bike and pedestrian crashes, but they account for more than 30% of all the lives lost. So that brings it rightly to the top of the list as a priority. We also looked at connectivity. We wanted easy and reliable connections for people to get where they need to go through walking and biking. And we know that there are a lot of gaps in that network. So trying to tap into the data and the experts around the region to help fill some of those gaps. We also looked at making opportunity important principle. We continue to focus on equity by promoting increased access to non-motorized transportation options. And participation, we want to increase the number and proportion of bike and walk trips that people take on a regular basis. Finally, engagement. We wanted to make sure that as part of any planning process, but in this case, we wanted to really amplify the voices of underserved populations and try to aim our resources there. So from a regional standpoint, the active transportation issues extend across jurisdictional boundaries. There are a lot of routes that weave in and out of local communities, but provide regional connectivity. And there's a lot of challenges on those roads as well. So this plan has been a good way to kind of take on those challenges of looking across borders for regional connectivity. And the plan follows a pretty conventional methodology, which I'll describe in the following slides. Overall, took a practical approach to try to get the most out of the available resources, and starting with a review of best practices, assembling data and existing conditions, running analyses, and then engaging with the public and our planning partners. Try to use all those findings to inform strategies and recommendations for implementation. So the final report compiles all those pieces, and there are supporting tech memos that are linked throughout the plan. and I'll provide a link to those documents in the chat shortly. Now, in terms of engagement, we've been trying to put a lot of emphasis on kind of flipping the public engagement process, mainly through pop-ups where planners are going to the public instead of the other way around. We attended and engaged at 12 different pop-ups at large events throughout the region. We helped to gather public feedback on their active transportation experiences through a survey and an online web map. And we got 400 web map responses and 600 surveys, sort of giving us information about where people prefer to bike and walk and where they face challenges, where they would like to bike and walk if it was safe and convenient. And the responses kind of reinforced a lot of what we've already heard, but important information. People would bike and walk more if it was more safe and convenient. They generally support a connected network and are very interested in more trails and maintaining those trails that are existing. So those were some of the key themes that we found. Also, part of the engagement, we established a technical advisory committee for the study, and we wanted to tap into the expertise around the region from our planning partners, including some members of RTAC, and participants around the state helped to advise on the planning priorities and also to review some of the draft products. We also had focus groups to help capture some of the input from traditionally underrepresented population groups, such as minorities or people with disabilities. And we also had small group interviews to gather more specific information about success with implementation of active transportation. So we heard from a lot of planners and engineers around the state to help inform a strategy guide. In terms of our technical approach, we performed a trip potential analysis or a demand analysis, and that was to help identify where people would be most likely to walk or bike in the region based on factors that are associated with pedestrian and bicycle trip attraction. So those include things like population, employment, intersection density, poverty, and vehicle access, transit locations, land use. We also ran separate analyses for pedestrians and cyclist demand. So the map on the right is an aggregate of the trip potential scores. We also ran a barriers analysis, and this was to help find which links in the network are presenting challenges for active transportation connectivity. And also which links would have greater purpose and utility if improvements were made. Also looked at equity and safety to overlay those factors. We wanted to explore that intersection of safety and connectivity and equity. Did some overlays. The map you see here just shows one of the outputs from that analysis, which is areas with high bike trip potential in purple on top of environmental justice populations. So we used all these results to help fine-tune the network in each county. And here's a map of the conceptual network. This was a central focus for the plan. In addition to the data pieces that I just described, we also gathered incorporated feedback on existing trails and bike lane data to include in the network. That included the NJDP trails layer that was developed last year, as well as any additional trails and bike lane data that we could gather. So that helped to ensure that the proposed routes are connecting or expanding on existing trails. And you can see here in this map of Bergen County that recreational trails are included. Those are the ones in green. And again, trying to connect the network you see the network in red here. The two boxes in the map are illustrating two examples of how the trails connect or align with the network. Also had public feedback to help inform this network. The web map results showed that over 70% of the responses at least partially overlap with the conceptual network. Another part of the information gathering for the network was stakeholder input. We had, as well, in addition to NJTPA staff, we had our sub-regional partners, TAC members, providing insights and additions to the network. We kind of reviewed and found some high-stress routes or local alternatives, and trying to integrate the trails with the network and removing duplication. So that was helpful to have their review. I also want to point out here that you're seeing the red conceptual network. It's we're showing it with a half-mile buffer, and the purpose there was really to they're built off of regionally important roads that connect to those high demand places, but those are also some of the most stressful roads in the region. So for those cases, and there are a lot of them, the buffer captures perhaps a number of different routes within bike and walking distance that can serve as low stress alternatives. So counties and municipalities can kind of look to focus on roads that parallel or achieve that same connectivity. There's a tech memo in the final plan that explains all the methodology and rationale for the network, and it includes some a list of road segments and also a section for each county. All right, so we also included a set of small group interviews to help inform a strategy guide. This is a guidance document for subregions to help incorporate active transportation network into regional and local plans. So to translate those policies into actions with a set of recommendations. The small group interviews, we had participants from all around the region, county planners, city planners, engineers, NJTPA staff, as well as some subset of our study TAC. And we wanted to get their feedback and reveal some of the key ingredients for successful implementation. So what's in the secret sauce, right? This strategy guide had a lot of, as I said, we had a lot of discussions with some of the experts, and it includes a lot of lessons learned, some of the key players and roles that they took on, and crucial considerations for implementation and maintenance. So the strategies that we came up with are organized into guidance for locals or county planners. The major themes include capacity building, interjurisdictional coordination, data collection, equity and environmental justice, funding options, and community engagement. Within each of those categories, we spell out some specific actions and strategies that we can take on as part of that process. So, for example, part of the capacity building theme, there was a recommendation to invite staff and elected leaders to do walk and bike audits, to experience, on the ground what the corridor is like as a pedestrian or a cyclist, and that helps to change perspectives and generate some shared understanding of the needs and priorities. So it's the strategy guide is built off of those kinds of insights and options to help advance active transportation planning. We also had 2 case studies within the plan. This is where a project team conducted sketch planning exercises. These case studies are selected because they kind of represent some of the common challenges and opportunities that communities face with implementing active transportation projects. So we selected them. They were based on factors like how do they align with the conceptual network? How do they function as connectors between downtown trails and transit, so forth. So the locations were at Parish Drive in Wayne and Main Street in Stanhope and Netcon. We did a site assessment to look at the corridor characteristics, and then held stakeholder meetings to discuss the issues and come up with locally informed solutions. And the result is like a menu of different tactics that they could take on to inform the next stage of planning. Finally, we had in lieu of a third case study, we did a research and review of best practices for designing for implementation of active transportation infrastructure through major highway interchanges. And these kinds of areas are conflict zones. They can really pose a lot of challenges for running continuous bike lanes or sidewalks. So this is mostly based on AASHTO's upcoming design guide update. And this task also had a mapping exercise to locate all the intersections with highway interchanges throughout the region. So now that the plan is complete, we were able to recently post all of the active transportation plan documents on the NJTPA website, and that's under completed studies. Going forward, we'll also be able to we'll be working on providing some of the or all of the data really on a map viewer tool. So that'll help counties and municipalities to help gather data and to look at where to select or prioritize implementation efforts that align with the regional active transportation goals. So we can also move forward and kind of consider other ways of providing ongoing assistance to advance the active transportation plan as those opportunities arise. For example, I'd be happy to present this work and provide a breakdown for any of the any committees or working groups that focus on active transportation, whether it's trails development or complete streets or safety. Of course, they'll continue to weave this into programmatic guidance for our planning partners. So, in summary, all these resources are combining to set up a pretty solid framework for jurisdictions, whether it's a state or county or municipal, to plan and implement active transportation projects in a coordinated way. So we'll be available in any way possible to assist in that process. And that's my final slide, I believe. I'm happy to take questions and just want to say thank you again.